Hey everyone, welcome. Welcome to the Paketo Working Group weekly meeting. We're glad that you're joining. We appreciate your time. Again, I'm sharing here in the Zoom chat a link to the agenda and notes. Please add yourself to the attendees list, including your affiliation. And well, let me share my screen and we'll get started from there. Cool. So for this session, is there anyone who would like to take notes?
I can take notes.
Oh, thank you, friends. Thank you. All right. New faces. Well, I see Glenn Atkinson. Thank you for joining. And if you don't mind introducing yourself. Great.
Hey there, I'm Brent. I work at Rapid7 with Jericho actually, and been doing some work with Golang while he's working on the Python side here recently.
Awesome. Joining. Yeah, it's very good. It's really nice. A lot of great work with your work. So we're really happy to have you.
David, you're a little bit muddled right now. I sound a little robotic.
I'm sorry. Let me change here. What about there?
Much better.
Cool. Yeah, sorry. Every time I try to, I give a chance to the Yeti, falls apart. All right, great. So let's move to reviewing outstanding RFCs. So starting with the RFC, the new feature checklist. So we were wondering if there's any recent update or is there anything else you would like to discuss about this proposal?
I went back with I responded to Emily's message on this yesterday, so I haven't really given her much time to talk about this. I agree with part of the sentiment of what she's saying, which is it might be nice to have a strong division of responsibilities. But I also think that that's a bit limiting, and in some cases, like, I don't want to deeply prescribe how certain steps, who should handle certain steps, and think that they should be able to be picked up more ad hoc. So I'm just waiting for her to respond on that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for it. All right. Next up, this is a proposal from Thomas Vitali. And the last I saw is that he's okay with merging the RFC, even when the implementation is in progress. I think if there is no objection, it already has some approvals. We should be ready to merge. Is there any objection about this? No. Okay, so this one will be okay to merge. Great. Next up, the RFC to publish images to ECR. The most recent update was that Emily is planning to reach out to the AWS App Runner folks. Not sure if there's any update about this. Is anyone aware about an update to this proposal? Okay, so we will check with Emily. Cool. Next up, the web service re-architecture. I saw a recent update about this. Put it here.
Yeah, sorry, this is me again. Sorry, I'm trying to just make sure I'm keeping up with the notes.
Yeah.
So I responded to Emily's feedback about wanting a bit more follow-up on the reasoning as to why splitting into components made more sense. So I've added a more concrete example with PHP and hopefully driven out more of the reasons why I want to have a dependency providing build pack on top of functionality build packs. I've also, in the rationale and alternative section, fleshed out my alternative more to highlight what I meant by like just ensure compatibility, and that's just ensure that the configuration that's written by the build pack can be overwritten in later steps, which is kind of the workaround that we have to do now, and was what sparked the want to split these out into different build packs. But yeah, once again, I think this is just waiting to see if this fleshed out in Emily's eyes more of the problem and made it more justifiable.
Great. Thank you, Forrest. Is there any comment about this proposal? Yeah, otherwise feel free to add your comments, observations to the PR itself. Great. Next, RFC to include leads to Tiny that are needed for Node. I think the most recent update was that no consensus on moving forward with this proposal. So not sure what should be the next step. Letting the author know about this, or is there any further discussion that you?
Not a real update on this, but it's the first time I was able to join this call after my vacation, since the RSC was opened by my team. So maybe that makes sense to at least talk about that. So the motivation for us was that there's at least a certain set of Node apps that would run fine. And we strive for having a minimal image, more about like possible attack vectors than actual image size. I think I don't care that much about the bytes on that image. I'm not ruling out that we learn from internal consumers that there are certain things that are just needed for Node. So this might happen, but like simple Node apps definitely work. We tried all kinds of examples that we could find and didn't actually run over one that needed more than that. Right now we are running the one, I'm not sure if that is a listed alternative, but it's like we currently produce our own stacks. So for now we end up producing our own stack, our own builder, our own meta build pack. So basically we just pick the little pieces, the component build packs, and completely rewire them to our needs. I don't know if that's going to stay that way. Then we'll just do that. But that's like the motivation part of that. Because it would run like I agree that maybe extensions could be the right thing to actually fulfill that. Like, I don't know, who knows, maybe you could even reduce the tiny stack even further, take away some things that only Java needs, and instead have Node then with an even smaller image, missing the pieces that Java needs. But one of the questions that comes up is like, I don't know, I'm not sure if extensions is then going to be a mechanism where build packs can actually bring their dependencies, which I would really like. Like, I don't know, a Node build pack could in theory even know which Node packages actually require certain native object files. But I think that's not what build packs are striving for in terms of granularity. But maybe that would be best, right? That stack is basically scratch, and then everybody just adds what's needed. But I think it's not what the project is striving for. Like, it was at least not what I perceived. So that's the motivation why we brought up this PR. Seems pretty controversial. So
would you be willing to write a small update in the RFC about some of the testing that you've done and a bit more? Because I don't know that I'm going to be able to capture exactly what you've just laid out right there. Specifically, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
You mean like which things we actually tested?
I
think we also tested, like we tested everything we could find in the Paketo org, for example, like all the samples. I think we actually tested them. The stack that we currently build contains also a bash in addition to the two proposed things here. And I think the bash brings two other dependencies or one other dependency. That's because the node, like the npm start, actually requires a bash. We also thought about partially rewrite, like being able to rewrite even that, but decided that maybe it's not even worth it because the bash is okay as a dependency in this case. Other than npm start actually not really following the spec, because you could specify the bash you want npm start to use, but that's a different topic. So that's what we currently tested. So it's rather small apps that we tried this out with. So I can try to add some more details on what we exactly did. But as I said, we found some internal apps that we tested on, and I think tested with all the existing node examples in the Paketo org, like in the sample repo.
Perfect. Yeah, if you could just add that context, that'd be much.
But I can recheck that. We really tested everything there. Like at least the integration tests were fine as well. Like I can recheck if we tested everything. So actually, I'd say if like I think there are different reasons for rejecting this RFC, right? One is we don't want to add the dependencies for Node, like that we only need for a Node for other users of that. For this is not an argument. But one other was like, what's the number of apps that will actually be working with that? And for that, I'd say if that is a valid reason, then we should probably add coverage for some of those things, to really add some of those to make sure they actually work and run. Because I think we didn't find an example that didn't run with a tiny ++ stack that we built. So we didn't find any that required base other than these libraries. I mean, there's one little other caveat, like we have a Java 8 virtual machine that is, I think, still based on an Oracle license thing that is only available internally. And that is unfortunately dynamically linked. So it also requires the libstdc ++6 package. So we have one other reason besides Node to require that. As I said, right now we are rolling our own stack. Depending on other things, we might actually anyway need to continue doing that. Like the typical Ubuntu, like I guess that's only on the build image, and then maybe it's not that severe, but our licensing teams don't like the Oracle DB, and that's just present in every Ubuntu image. So if that stays the way, we anyhow have to, like, even to just not fight with that department, we might roll our own stack where this is not present. So let's see.
Thank you, Jan. Yeah, we really appreciate you adding your findings and comments to the PR itself. We can continue the discussion there. Thank you. All right, any other comment about this proposal? All right, next up, recent RFC, including an addendum for removing mixins on jamming. Okay.
So it's just an addition to an existing RFC. I know we talked about it in the working group meetings. It was like verbally discussed that the jammy stacks would not include mixin definitions. And that actually led to, if you look at the stack descriptor RFC, mix-in definitions are listed underneath the like deprecated section of the stack.toml. You have to like set the flag under the deprecated table. But we, at the same time, I guess I forgot to also update the GME RFC to say explicitly that the GME stacks would not include these mix-ins. This is mostly just because in the hopefully reasonably short future timeline, CNB will be removing mix-ins from the stack definitions. And so we don't want to be caught in a place where we have to like continue to perpetuate this thing that no longer exists.
All right. Thank you, Ryan.
This just as a point, this looks like it already has all the approval it needs. Is there any reason to just not close this?
Not after I went to a working group and told people about it. That was the only remaining thing, was it should get presented at a working group meeting, which it's been presented at this point. So
All right, I'm not going to bother putting a note on this then.
Ooh, thank you. Okay, so seems like that's it in terms of RFCs, unless you want to discuss something else about that. Otherwise, we will move on to CMV updates and questions. I've seen some activity around trying to define a new RFC process. Not completed yet, but part of the activity I saw recently, but I don't know if you all are aware about any other updates noteworthy.
I guess on that idea of trying to update the RFC process, I believe that is an initiative that Emily was spearheading. And the idea is to try and give more autonomy to the individual groups inside of CNB. So platform, Buildpacks and like I guess core spec maintainers are going to sort of have more independence from just the steering committee to approve bits and RFCs for their particular sub projects. So if that's something that you're interested in because you're trying to contribute in upstream, it would be good to go and voice your opinion up there.
You're right. Yeah, thank you. I will add the PR link. No. Okay. Great. Any other upstream update you're aware of? Okay, great. Next up, project update. I wanted to take this opportunity to remind again about the Cloud Foundry Day that will be happening co-located KubeCon. I believe it's October 25th. See. And the big news here is that, yeah, October 25th. There is a proposal, call for proposals. If you want to share your knowledge, experience so far, or your observations around Paketo Buildpacks or any other Cloud Foundry Foundation project, you're welcome to do it. CFP closes this Friday, so it's important that you submit on time. You just need to submit the abstract, the proposal. This is what I want to share, and this is why I think it's important. That's it. Not the actual content of the session. And yeah, we invite you to register, attend virtually, or if you're going to KubeCon, that's great. There will be Cloud Foundry Foundation booth at KubeCon, and even part of the maintainers team, Paketo Buildpacks maintainers team will be there. So feel free to say hi. Great. Okay. Unless there is any other project update you would like to share here, we could move to the open discussion topics. First one is mine, the release note completeness. Turns out that one of the findings from the OSS health assessment that we ran on April this year was that probably release notes for Paketo Buildpacks are not easy to understand for a human being. This is just an example. That probably for new users it's not easy to understand what's new here, how to use it, why it's important. So there's a discussion right there in this issue. Try to define the best approach to provide more informational release notes, but that it doesn't mean more burden on maintainers. We don't want that. So there's a reason coming from John, and I'm happy to see him here on some of the tools he has used for this. I don't know if you wanted to expand on this, John. I think you're mute.
Now I'm unmuted. So I don't know if our release notes are much better, but we have at least, like, we worked a little bit on some tooling that can generate them, that, like, first of all works on a label on the PR in terms of grouping, like with whether something is a dependency update or a feature or these kind of things. And we also have something that you can use, a code block that's marked with what category something should be in, and you can basically overwrite the PR title. That would be the default thing that appears in the release notes. I think it's not much. I also wouldn't say it's necessarily much better than what Paketo currently has. I think on our Buildpacks, I'm just scanning the things on our Meta Buildpack right now, and the majority is just dependency updates, and you won't make them any prettier, I guess. So I think that would show more on another project that we internally run, where we do have something where we just have these sections where we put those in, and it's automated based just on metadata on the PRs. So it does not involve humans to actually rewrite the release notes in GitHub. It's really published automatically as part of our CI, based on data you can influence on the PRs themselves. If there is interest, I could, I guess there would be no reason not to open source this, but just if it's really finding interest, because it's not really, it would be open source to be able to share it, and not because we have an interest to run that as an SAP open source project. But if there's interest, we have something there that we could maybe share at least some examples of how this looks like, because of, like, we could potentially have some repo in the on github.com that shows here's a couple of PRs that were artificially created there, and here's the release notes, how they would look like.
That would be helpful.
That.
I know that the answer to this has to be something that is like heavily automated, just from the standpoint of, like, we have like 100 and some 150, 170, repositories with Buildpacks in them. Like, cutting releases is already like a very complex and toil accreting process. And so, like, reducing toil on that front so that it isn't like somebody's entire day to release Buildpack release would be really, like, that's the only tenable answer. So, like, figuring out where to put that information and then how to automatically have that information exposed through release notes is really the only kind of answer we would consider. One that's like, when a maintainer cuts a release, they manually tell you what's in it, is like, that won't scale at all. We're already beyond like human scale for cutting releases. So yeah, I would be interested to see what your tooling looks like and see if we might be able to leverage something like it or parts of it similarly on our own releases.
Yeah, as I said, like we have like labels, it's like type enhancement, type task, type dependency update, type ignore even, like we even have a mechanism for saying, yeah, that it's not worth putting into the release notes. That's the one part. And the other is there's a mechanism to like it would by default use the title of the PR as a line in a bullet list, and like putting a link in the end, but you can overwrite that with a code block in the first comment on the PR, so in the description basically. I guess on the GitHub side, this is just an arbitrary comment, just the first one, but we parse that, look for like backtick, and then release note or something like that, and then pick that up and publish that to the release notes. But it's fully automated. I personally, I don't need 120 projects before I start automating that. It's like even 20, it's like, why should you? It's not that hard to automate that, right?
No, it's been automated.
So we actually have both. We have a tool called Next that is calculating the version based on a somewhere tag on PRs, and we have a tool called Release Drafter, which creates a release draft. And I think that might even come from, I think you have something like that as well. It's called Release Drafter, so I guess it's even lended by there, and just improved a bit on that end. And then it is just generating these in a little bit nicer. Like it's then it has a title, it has an icon next to that. Like you can fully automated part of our CI to do that. So I'll try to figure out how we can make this something where we can show what it does without like being non-compliant to any of our regulatories. But I guess if there is interest to use that, it's a matter of just following the process to push that to the github.com side, and will be accepted. Maybe even the other way around by just doing it in the Paketo org and just reusing it internally. And let's see.
Great. Thank you, Jan. All right. Okay, so next item, all builder are Buildpack less RFC.
Yeah, so this is mine. I just put it in now. I didn't expect anyone to see this, but it is a bit of a radical idea for an RFC, and it's solving a problem that is going to become a much bigger problem sooner rather than later. So I'm trying to start putting it out. So the RFC itself is not in a 100% complete state, but the gist is there. So currently, if you didn't know, Docker has a limit on the number of layers that can be in an image, and that's restricted based on maybe file descriptor, something for the lowest or like the oldest version of Linux that they support, and the lowest power Linux that they support, and so they've capped it at 127 layers. We are rapidly approaching that for our builders because each build pack and each unique build pack is itself a layer inside of the builder. And so we're very, as we were talking, we have upwards of 150 to 170 build packs. Not all of them go directly into the builder, but that means that we are rapidly approaching going past the 127 layer mark. And it is sort of untenable to continue to have builders that where we put all of our build packs in. So this is a proposal to get rid of that concept entirely and make all of our current build packs or builders the equivalent of what our build packless builders are, and make the workflow such that you define a builder, which is effectively defining a stack and a lifecycle that you run against, and then picking the build pack that you want to run against. And you can do that either, sort of through pack by referencing the builder and picking a default and then doing -- build pack during your build, or putting it in the project toml, or in Kpack, you could define a custom builder on the stack cluster, or on the cluster store, I think, right? So like I said, this isn't 100% fleshed out. You can see there's a lot of unresolved questions on the best way to implement, go about actually doing the transition for this, what is needed for support, the drawbacks for this, etc. But I would love to get as many people to look at this as possible and get their opinions of people that integrate with Buildpacks, that maybe build custom builders or use our builders and extend them. So yeah, this is just more of a call to say, hey, there is a document talking about making a rather large change to what the builders are right now, and I would love people to take a look at it.
It's like from my side, we will definitely produce builders that contain the Buildpacks we support, because that's going to be easy integrated with the CI offering we have for our developers. But that's independent of what Upstream does, of course. But what immediately came to my mind is, can't we just change how we build builders? Like, is there a reason that every single build pack needs to be a layer? Couldn't we just say there's like, let's say there's a layer for the build image, and there's a layer per meta build pack containing everything that this brings with it, and that's an implementation on the Jam tool, right? That could just be done differently.
So
that's
it's
actually in Pack, but
yeah.
But yeah, you could totally do that, where we basically become more efficient in terms of number of layers at the cost of maybe being less efficient in terms of duplicative bytes across those layers, right? You might have like a Node.js build pack that's got 2 different versions, where like 90% of the build packs are identical across both. And like there really is only a small diff between the two. And it's like less efficient in the registry, but maybe more efficient for our builder.
Okay, got that.
It's also part of my unresolved questions in terms of potentially going to CNB and asking, is there a way for us to be more efficient, or coming up with some sort of structure? But yeah, it is an unfortunate problem that is looming nearer and nearer. So I wanted to get something out sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I mean, I would add that having the build packs like baked into the builder for someone new to build packs is actually confusing. I didn't understand what was going on, and I was specifying build packs even though they were already implicitly included in the builder. And like explicit is probably better than implicit. So maybe this is going in the right direction, at least from my perspective.
That's interesting and great feedback, because one of the things that I was concerned about is a lot of the reason that we have our builders with all the build packs is so that it's as easy as possible to just kind of slam build commands on top of whatever apps that you have, and hopefully have a successful build come out. But if your experience found someone starting out found the opposite, that's actually more confusing, and you'd rather be able to specify the language of your project, then I think that's really good feedback to have.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. When you try to explain to people what build packs are, but you're just calling a builder, you're not using the build packs. So then you have to go in there and be like, well, yeah, this is actually being used here and there, and it makes it a little bit hard to explain what's going on. So yeah, that was my experience. But yeah.
Yeah, that's excellent feedback. We don't need to sit here and litigate this, honestly, not 100% done statement, but I wanted a document to be here that can be read and the idea be present. So yeah, that's all I have for this particular update.
Great, thank you. So I see it in a draft state. When it's done from your side, we can also start grabbing more feedback from the community. Is that correct?
Yeah, and grabbing feedback from the community is actually is an integral part of the RFC. I have basically that this can't move forward, like we can't merge this until we have this posted in basically as many channels as we can find relevant implementers.
Got it. Right, awesome. Thank you. Next up, keep adding topics. This is great. Make all Python and Golang build packs support all stacks.
Okay, so yeah, I can chime in here. So I think we've already discussed the CPython build pack PR that I put up, and I saw that Rob gave me some feedback, and I plan to implement all of that. So that's really helpful. I appreciate that. While I was waiting for that feedback, I also started looking at the other build packs that are connected to just the general Python meta build pack, and I saw that it would actually be fairly easy to support all stacks basically on all the other ones as well. And I've actually got working examples on Docker Hub with, you know, documentation on how to do it, which I'm happy to share. Part of what I wanted to do is just kind of bring that up and find out if that's, you know, a PR per build pack, or if that's an RFC that we need to do, or, you know, what are your thoughts on kind of doing this, and kind of get some input. And before I finish, I like the CPython part was just the first step. And then once that foundation has been laid, the rest, I think, are essential in order to have this kind of experience be worthwhile. Otherwise, just going to be calling different versions of build packs, and it's going to be ugly. So yeah, I'd like to get some thoughts and feedback on that.
Sure. Yeah, first of all, thanks for submitting the PR. Looks good, as I said. I think to answer your question about specifically for Python and stack support, I think there's sort of two broad categories of build packs, or maybe 4 categories of build packs, right? There's the meta build pack, which is just a group of other build packs, doesn't really do much by itself, just an order group. And then you have like 3 sort of types of sub-component build packs. Those are like the ones that install something to the file system, like CPython, like you have already looked at. Ones that kind of just set like commands and maybe environment variables in the Python ecosystem, that would be like Python start and poetry run. And then in the other type of build pack is one that does something like pip install or conda env update, or something that kind of like relies on existing tools, but also kind of like does manipulate the file system in the layer. And generally, I see no reason that the start command build packs and the like pip install build packs, there's no reason they can't support any stack. I don't have any reason to believe that they're tied to any particular operating system. So the concerns that I sort of have, like CPython and the wildcard stack allowing it to potentially run on Windows, even though it won't, that's just not going to be a problem for pip install. It's not going to be a problem for like the start command build packs. So those ones, no question, just PR changes if need be. Some of them probably already support wildcard stacks. The remaining build packs would be things like Miniconda, I think is probably the biggest one. The one that still installs something to the file system, and it's still very operating system dependent. And honestly, I would just say the same thing for that we'd said for CPython, which is like, yes, in order to like support a stack that isn't a Paketo stack, we're going to have to do wildcard stacks. And there's no constraint in the lifecycle today that allows us to say like, support Linux stacks or Ubuntu distributions or anything like that. So just, I would say like, it's fine. We'll just do the same changes everywhere. If you want to submit an RFC, feel free. I don't particularly think it's necessary, but I'm happy to defer to other people who might have stronger opinions about process.
I think our biggest concern on this front is like we would go and say, yes, we technically allow this to run on any stack, and then CNB down the line actually gives us the API that we really want, which is to say this runs on Linux or this runs on Debian-like distributions of Linux. Then we do that, and then that breaks people who are relying on the fact that it's running on, we said wildcard, which literally means anything, which isn't truthful necessarily about like what we're trying to say. So mostly it's like we're caught in this weird spot where we have an API that's not very helpful and is not, at the end of the day, a stack ID is like becoming a less and less meaningful thing at all, to the point where literally almost all of the things we want, now that we've got 2 stacks, everyone's like, well, how about 3? How about 4? And we're basically just putting star stack on every build pack in the entire project. And then it's like, well, what is the point of a stack ID almost at all anymore? And the original point was to be able to kind of like declare some amount of compatibility between things. And so our worry is like, we're just going to get into this kind of free for all state where we say, yes, it works on every stack. And folks are going to have lots of things. And then we're going to actually get to the API we want, where we say it really, we do say that it works on this distribution of Linux, or maybe a handful of distributions of Linux, but that will break people and that they will be upset that we've like made a very generous API that we then pull back on and make much more limited. That's my biggest concern about this. I don't know if other folks have thoughts.
I have that concern, but I think in the specific case that Jericho's talking about, which is like compiling dependencies from source on stacks that aren't the Paketo stack, like in order for the situation you described to be true, Ryan, like someone has to have found a stack that it already works on, which means it's a Linux like Debian-like stack already, right? And then in the future, we get this new API that allows us to say like, yes, we support Linux, Debian-based stacks, whatever, and they should still work, right? I'm not super worried about finding, I can't really see how we would get into an edge case where like the proposals that Jericho is talking about specifically would work in some situation that we would then choose later not to support. My fear was more around like the lifecycle can't do its job and can't reject the build pack because of the stacking compatibility, and that's a bad user experience.
That's
Yeah.
fair too.
I might be missing something though, right?
I don't exactly recall where I read that. If it was somewhere in the Paketo and the Buildpacks IO or in the content, I even read the recommendation to favor doing star and having other means of rejecting that, like at runtime detecting that this doesn't work, actually, but I can't find it right now. But I think I've read that somewhere. I didn't find it in the spec right now. That's where I did immediately look, but I couldn't find that.
Yeah, and I will say, oh, did I lose you guys? Sorry.
Oh, we can hear you.
That's fine. My screen just shut off for some reason. Yeah, I will say that, you know, I kind of look at this as a baby step in the direction. Clearly, like there's some changes that need to be made anyway to improve things going forward. And, you know, if this is like one trial, if there's some errors along the way, you're going to learn from it. But I actually agree with Rob that it's pretty low risk. I don't really see how people's experience could be changed. And the changes that I've proposed and the changes that I'll propose in the other PRs will basically support your existing setup. So like the dependencies that you're verifying, nothing's going to change there. It's just going to allow you to do this on another stack. And so I've actually tested like dependency version constraint, and you still get an error if you're trying to install, I think it was like Python 3.10.6 with poetry or something. I was getting some issues that are good. It's showing me that, you know, the existing setup that you have in place is working. And if it's expecting a certain version, then it won't work. So yeah, I think it's a low risk situation from my perspective too. Okay, that's really helpful. So I'll do PRs for the remainder of that stuff. And then I did have a question, unless there's more comments on that. No, okay, cool. I did have a question about the releases. I know you guys were talking about release notes earlier, and I spent some time looking at releases while updating the tests to make sure that this worked. And I can see that the tests are based on the releases. So it like goes and pulls down a release. Is there any plan to kind of change how that works? And kind of, this is kind of a loaded question, but like right now the releases are AMD 64 only. And you know, it's like, is there any plan to change that going forward in any way?
I guess change it to what? Like, do you have a preference for something else?
Oh, well, I mean, when I learned about Buildpacks, I thought they were all just images. I thought you're just pulling down container images of the Buildpack. So that's basically how I've been working. But then I had to start using releases to get some of these tests to work. And anyways, like I'm just trying to say, well, actually, maybe the question is does the test framework support using Buildpacks? It looks like it was very much tied to releases only, or is there a plan to support using Buildpacks instead of releases? I'm sorry, Docker images, not like GitHub releases. That's what I meant to say.
Yeah, so the GitHub releases should have both artifacts on them. They have a tarball representation, and they also have a .cnb, which is a tar representation of the actual image that is generated when the build pack is created. And then like when we actually cut a release, all it does is like upload that CNB file into our registry. So it's like bit for bit the same thing that's on the release. That's the .cnv file asset. So there's two assets on the release. The biggest issue we have is that the tests do some manipulation of the release artifact in order to assert that offline functionality behaves. So we don't publish offline artifacts anywhere, but we have instances where we download a tarball of the release, and then we rip it open and we shove all the dependencies that should be in that release into the tarball and re-archive it. And then we use that in a test. And so that's why there's this linkage to like the tarball artifact specifically. Presumably we could do the same thing with the image, just as a much more complex transformation process. We have to like take the image and like rip the image open and rip open the layers inside the image, then like grab the files we want and like repackage them and then like re-architect the entire thing back up. It's totally doable. We just haven't found the time to go and do it when like the system we have is kind of working already for what we have been doing. Now, if there's a real need or a real pressure for us to switch to using images, like I don't think you'd see anyone on the team who's like, no, it has to be releases or has to be this release tarball artifact. It mostly is like, it's been working for the use cases we care about. And so we haven't really seen a need to change it. That being said, if you're running a test that doesn't need to do this like re-architecting to make like an offline asset, you should be able to go to the integration.json file that like references the build packs and swap out either something you have on your file system or like an image reference, I believe. And if you can't get that to work, like you should just ping someone in the channel and like we can work through like why that doesn't work for you.
Okay. Yeah, that's helpful feedback. Okay. Yeah, I mean, like that's maybe I need to do some more learning on my end. Okay, cool. Yeah, so I think that's all the questions I had. I did want to introduce something that Brent has been working on, and then I'll let him kind of talk about it. So obviously we're adding support for all stacks for Python. That's because we're trying to support Python, but we also have some Go apps that we need to support. So Brent's been looking at how we can do that for the Go dist build pack. And he's come up with like, you know, we've talked about it and kind of like have a version 1 approach. I wanted to get some input from you guys on, you know, what you think, and so that we can obviously make sure that whatever we're developing is going to actually be helpful versus, you know, creating a fork that like no one wants to use and go in a completely different direction.
Awesome. Great. Brent, do you want to share your screen?
Yeah, I can share
Let me
just
stop.
kind of an example of what I've been looking at in changing the like build pack tunnel to support all stacks. This is kind of what I've been looking at right now. This is the original kind of dependency code, and so we're trying to support all stacks here. And then while we're at it, we figured we might as well add some, because Go installation is a little bit different than Python. You basically just pull down the tarball and unpack it. And so I was like, oh, it shouldn't be too difficult to add in some extra functionality for like the ARM architecture, that sort of thing. And so I wanted to get thoughts on kind of what changes I've made here, and is this kind of the direction that the team is wanting to go in the future, or yeah, kind of general thoughts.
I'm not a Go maintainer, but I can probably start the conversation. I think in general, the idea of, for Golang specifically, the idea of getting the Golang tarball from the official like Golang website is definitely the direction the Go project is going to go in. And I think the upcoming dependency refactor work, which we sort of talk about periodically, is actually just going to do this for Golang, right? Forrest, you're a Go maintainer?
I'm sorry.
Sir. Yeah, I am. Yeah, I mean, I haven't obviously buckled down and actually done some implementation. I've been playing a little bit with it on the side, but it's going to generally look something like this. I mean, I can't speak to the breakdown of AMD 64 versus ARM 64. I think we need like a bit more of a definition of that. And so if that's what you're proposing, then I would love to see a deeper proposal on that. But yeah, generally speaking, I think we're just going to try and pull it in from whatever Google is shoveling out to us to download.
Like the source versus Paketo.io, right?
Yeah, that looks generally correct.
Okay.
But like I said, that still hasn't been solidified yet, and I haven't gotten to really like sit down. But that is I think the approach that we're going to go with first with our initial rework of dependency, or how we do dependencies in Go.
Cool, sounds good. Then in that case, I can probably put like a PR together just for some people to look over, see if that's in the right direction.
And a quick question on that. I've seen this kind of RFC for the new dependency management setup. Is there an example already? I don't know if there was an example, like I know there was discussion in there, but is there an example repo where somebody's like done it so we can copy and experiment from?
I don't think any repo has been done yet, but I know that some folks are actively working on moving over a couple of dependencies to that new system and like actively working on it. So I would hope in the coming couple of weeks, there'd be at least one thin thread example of that.
Okay, cool. Sweet. Awesome. That's all I got. Thank you very much for all the input.
No, thank you both for sharing.
I have a kind of sidebar question. The fact that you're like talking about ARM64, do you have an ARM64 stack that you're building and working with?
Yeah, so the Amazon Linux stack that I've created for testing all of this stuff, I created it's multi-arch, so it's got ARM64 and AMD 64, and that's how we build our stacks internally at this point. So you know, I don't know what the kind of future plan for the project is, but a lot of developers are kind of doing that, so we're just meeting them where they are, and that's why we're doing it that way.
Yeah, I ask because one of the goals of the stacks project is to support multi-arch stacks, and by extension, I assume one of our goals as Paketo is to support multi-arch build packs. A lot of us are using ARM64 locally, and it would be nice to have ARM64 images. But yeah, I was just curious. So it sounds like you're actively using ARM64 stacks in your like cloud environment.
Well, I think working towards that. I mean, like really, we're working within what you guys have done so far, but as we work together, I think we can actually get there. So yeah.
I just posted a link to the upstream CNB RFC about removing stacks concept and mixins. I think this is useful just to kind of like look at the direction that these types of like dependency linkages are going to be heading in for like a dependency linking itself somehow to the underlying operating system. Today, that linkage is in the stack ID. It's like all the dependencies are just like, I work on Bionic and I work on Jammy. And it's becoming this more fuzzy, like Linux that's an x86 64 particular architecture and maybe has like name Ubuntu as like its distribution. When we think about what our dependencies table might look like in the build packs, I would say it probably looks something very similar to this, where like underneath each dependency, you're gonna say like, this is capable of running on Linux with this particular architecture. Maybe you're going to be more specific because it might have some linkages to particular versions of OpenSSL that are only available on a distribution of Ubuntu. And then you might, so like when you're thinking about designing a proposal for like how you might have different types of architectures declared for different dependencies in that dependencies table, like use this particular structure as kind of like a jumping off point for like what that kind of API might look like. Just because like we're going to want to align with like what the upstream CMB folks give us as an API.
Okay, that sounds good. I guess a quick follow-up is right now the postal dependencies kind of package, it doesn't really accommodate this other stuff. So I assume there's going to be some changes to that in order to like handle all of this. So if we get it working with our own kind of version of it, that's fine. And then, you know, in the future, you guys may adopt it or just create another version of it. Okay.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
Honestly, if you get it working and just want to jam it into Postal or put an RFC, less work for me. That's awesome.
Okay, cool. Well, I don't know Go that well, but we can do our best. Yeah. All right, that's good. That's helpful because if we end up getting it to work and we could help you, then that would be good. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you to the Rapid7 team for everything you were doing. Awesome. We had a last FYI on canonical chisel. So I don't know if someone would like to comment about this in 50 seconds.
I've put that entry there. I just stumbled upon that in a blog I found on Twitter. Canonical seems to be working on something similar to APCO for Alpine things, for having a declarative definition of what should go into there, and maybe have kind of upstream support for something like the tiny stack that is currently like, yeah, build something here using apt and then just copy what we know needs to be copied. Could maybe in the future be replaced by, you can just give it, here's that slice of what should be on there, and then actually having a kind of canonical sanctioned mini like distroless thing. It's not even distroless then, right? It's then a very small Ubuntu distro. I just wanted to raise awareness that this exists if you didn't know about it. But we will be looking into that, so maybe I might have updates in the future of how this was looking like. And I'm completely lost from the call, it appears, right? You all are not moving.
I can hear you.
No, we're here.
Great. So that's why I've put it as an FYI to like, I don't know if you have seen that. It seems to be very fresh, pretty cutting edge. They seem to have collaborated with Microsoft to create a .NET Core distroless image based on Ubuntu.
Yeah,
package
I saw that.
stuff.
I
It
saw
could
the
be interesting
.NET
for stack
announcement.
building.
I saw the .NET Core announcement. I did not see that there was a separate tool. I just saw in the .NET Core announcement, they're like, we've chiseled it down to this small image. And I was like, wow. And I didn't see like that they had another tool they'd released. So it's cool that you found that. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So
for
it's like the
sharing.
links are the tool and the definition of some first slices of what should be in an image. I guess that is what was needed to support Microsoft and what they developed. So yeah, could be interesting. I might have updates in the future. So we'll experiment with it, and I think I've set up a call with the PM at Canonical that's responsible for that tool. So I might get something out of that.
Cool.
Cool. Well, thank you all for joining, for all your contributions and help. I'm glad to see you all here and hope to see you next week.
Likewise, thank you.
See you. Thanks.
Bye.